1940 wasn't the best of years for Europe or really the world, as World War II had kicked off in September of 1939 with the German and Soviet invasion of Poland. Germany invaded Denmark in a day and would begin their campaign in Norway in April. However, Norway didn't stand alone in the campaign, as the French and primarily British sent in ground troops to support Norway and fight the Nazi invaders. A British Army expeditionary force was landed at Andalsnes in Romsdal to support the Norwegian army units defending the city of Trondheim. British forces were also landed at Namsos, north of the area, in a complete pincer movement, and the British landings were unsuccessful and the Allies would suffer a significant defeat in the area. The campaign was fought until June 10, 1940, and saw the escape of King Haakon VII and Crown Prince Olav to the United Kingdom. A British, French, and Polish expeditionary force of 38,000 troops landed in the north, and it had been a moderate success but made a rapid strategic retreat after the Battle of France in May of 1940. The Norwegian government then went into exile in London, and the campaign ended with the occupation of the entirety of Norway by the Germans. However, elements of the Norwegian military were able to escape and fought overseas. On May 28th, 2 French and 1 Norwegian battalion attacked and recaptured Narvik from the Germans. To the south of the city, Polish troops advanced eastwards, and other Norwegian troops were pushing the Germans back towards the Swedish border. However, like I said with the German invasion of France in the Low Countries, this would immensely alter the overall situation and importance of Norway. On May 25th, 3 days before the recapture of Narvik, the Allied commanders had received orders to evacuate from Norway, and the attack on the city was in part carried out to mask the Allied intention of leaving the country. Shortly after the May 28th Allied recapture of Narvik, the city was bombed and heavily damaged by the Luftwaffe. Failures of the British against the Germans include the fact that the Germans undoubtedly had air supremacy. Additionally, Norway was somewhat of a logistical nightmare, as the British could really only be supported by sea, which again isn't great when Germany has air supremacy. Numerically, Allied ground forces were 90,000, and were only 10,000 troops less than the Germans, who stood at 100,000. Another issue was, of course, the German invasion of France and the Low Countries, which heavily redirected Allied intentions. Changes to make in an alternate timeline would have to include somehow preventing Germany from controlling the skies in Norway. This isn't the most realistic change, but it would definitely be needed for the Allies to have been successful in Norway. Another change would have to be a delay in the German invasion of France and the Low Countries, so the phony war continues. This will allow for the Allies to not withdraw from Norway and instead provide more support for their expeditionary forces. In this alternate timeline, there will be a British redeployment of troops to send into Norway and not France. Again, since the Germans can't have air supremacy, the British Royal Air Force will have a larger presence in the campaign when brought up with aircraft carriers. Britain will also be diverting forces from the expeditionary force in France in order to go to Norway. Since things in Norway are not going in Germany's favor, Hitler is going to stay mad and rethink his plans. Speaking of which, there will now be a German redeployment of troops. If Norway remained free and the Allies were successful, Germany would now need to divert even more troops away from the phony war and off the borders of France and the Low Countries to move into Norway. But the invasion of France is still going to happen. With that, there's less German and British troops in country, but the country will still fall in my opinion. However, Germany is going to have the Free Norwegian thorn in its side, as well as the fact that the British and the Allied forces in Norway had been able to defeat 100,000 Germans. Germany will be sending in another full invasion force because Hitler really isn't going to be wanting to invade the Soviet Union until after Norway is subjugated. The second invasion will be overwhelming in late 1940 and early 1941, but this will also be delaying other key campaigns of World War II for the Axis, not just on the Eastern Front, but also the North African Theater and the Balkans campaign. Although the Allies would, in my view, eventually be pushed out of Norway in this second invasion, it would cause severe consequences for the Axis, not only because the Germans had lost hardcore in the first invasion of Norway, but also with all of this delaying. Starting with the situation in the Balkans, Yugoslavia was the embodiment of political chaos. Before the Axis actually invaded the country in our timeline, Yugoslavia was fascist, then the government was overthrown, and following this, the Axis invaded, so it's really quite difficult to say how things in Yugoslavia will go over the course of the next year. However, Greece will be a bit easier to predict. The Greeks are going to have a better prepared defense for the German invasion after beating the Italians. Additionally, more British troops will be transferred from North Africa into Greece in order to fortify the area to make it a lot harder on Germany. Meanwhile, in North Africa, the Allies beat the life out of the Italians in 1940 in our timeline, and Germany had to intervene with the Afrika Korps and the Desert Fox himself, Erwin Rommel. But here things are going to go a little bit different. The Italians are still going to have their butts kicked, but because Greece had more troops and Germany has sent a second Norwegian invasion and lost a lot in the first, things in North Africa may go a lot better for the Allies. Greece will eventually fall after a larger Axis invasion force as well, but all of this will come back to hurt the Germans. Germany will have had just such a massive defeat in their first invasion of Norway that it would be very hard to predict how the German high command would react. Okay, so let's say it's an alternate December 1941, and Germany now controls everything they had in our timeline in June 1941. That's 6 additional months of delay for the Germans and more manpower used up in a lot more campaigns that had been far, far more difficult. When the Germans do invade the Soviet Union, the Blitzkrieg will be effective with the Soviets caught completely off guard initially, but the Germans won't be able to advance as much, and World War II will be changed in ways that can't accurately be determined or predicted, especially regarding North Africa, the Eastern Front, and German occupation of Norway. Perhaps World War II in Europe may end a full year sooner, as again all these delaying actions against Germany will provide a lot of time for other Allied countries to prepare, and other campaigns which were crucial for the Axis would not be going their way. And like I said several times, Germany will have consumed a lot of manpower in the first invasion of Norway and now with a second invasion of the country. This is just one possible scenario. What do you think would have happened had the British and Allied forces been successful in Norway? Write in the comments and thank you for watching.